Thank you, Chamberlain. We have with us retired Group Captain Sadiq Shehu, who is a security consultant. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily, and a Happy New Year to you.
Happy 2020 to you, Mawbe.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Well, just, will I say, on New Year's Day, the President did release his New Year greeting and his message to Nigerians. And there were quite a number of aspects in that message which some people have taken up. Part of what he talked about security, and he acknowledged the fact that we have been fighting a war, well, maybe not a war, but fighting on several fronts. I'm going to read verbatim what he said. Violent extremists, cultists, and organized criminal networks. It has not been easy, but as we're winning the war, yeah, there is a word war there, we also look to the challenge of winning the peace, the reconstruction of lives, communities, and markets. The Northeast Development Commission will work with local and international stakeholders to help create a new beginning for the Northeast. Our security forces will receive the best training and modern weaponry, and in turn will be held to the highest standards of professionalism and respect for human rights. We will use all the human and emerging technological resources available to tackle kidnapping, banditry, and armed robbery. Now, while the President says this, some people think that it would seem that the war on terrorism is on the decline. That, you know, there needs to be fresh energy pumped into the war on terror, especially from within the armed forces. Perhaps the terrorists are not taking territory, but it seems to be giving our soldiers a difficult time. I don't know if you've been monitoring what is going on in the Northeast, but would you agree with those who give this perspective?
Well, I would agree on one aspect. I will disagree mostly on the other. The point is, when you are making a comparison, just like a man making a journey, you look at where you came from, where you are now, and where you are going. So in all honesty, an objective analysis of the service chiefs when they came in 2015, especially ending 2014 to mid-2015, the situation in the Northeast and what we have now. There are empirical evidence shown both by sources within Nigeria and outside Nigeria, independent persons, that definitely there's an improvement. Of course, from the time that Buhari came and this service chief came again, it has been like a zigzag. But generally, it's a downward trend in the security situation, even though like towards ending of 2018, we saw a spike in Boko Haram, especially with the Metele attack, which beefed up the numbers. However, despite all these things, we'll say from 2015 to now, there has been appreciable progress in the fight. Can it be better? Of course it can be better. There is nothing that cannot be improved. Now, the issue of,
So indeed, perhaps there has been appreciable zeal. I mean, before, we did know that, you know, Boko Haram took territory. Or we'll be reminded that Boko Haram, you know, their reign of terror reigned as far as even Abuja and, you know, a lot, yes, Kano and a number of other places. But we know that by 2015, and also with the coming in of the new government, you know, there were vigorous and concerted efforts to reclaim all the territory of Nigeria and also push back the terrorists. We also saw a command given to then the security chiefs to move their base to the Northeast. And there was a lot of vigor. I think there was a lot of attention being paid there. We will see, for instance, the Chief of Army Staff doing push-ups with the troops, trying to boost morale and all of that. However, since that time, let's say since we saw all of that almost culminating in when the Minister of Information said that we had defeated terrorism. Sadly, though, we will still see some pockets of attacks here and there. And he was saying, oh, they're is it the size or something of a dying beast, something to that effect. However, since that time, there's certainly a lot of question around where we currently are. There have been reports of low troop morale. There have been reports of inadequate weapons for our troops. There have been reports of sometimes even soldiers not getting the allowances. There have been reports of troops not being rotated as and when due. These are reports that have been filtering in from the Northeast. Even an upsurge in the attack of Boko Haram insurgents, which shows that it seems that there is a regrouping by these people, and that they seem to be getting more boosting, maybe financial boosting, and even arms to them as well. So somehow it looks like we're dropping the guard.
Well, you raised so many issues. First, on the issue of, troops' morale, lack of equipment. In all honesty, in a national war effort, there are different actors that have to play their part. The service chiefs, they provide good leadership to the troops to fight. But as far as equipment is concerned, I think that is the function of the federal government. It's not the function of the service chiefs to provide equipment for the troops. But what the service chiefs or the federal government or the president or the nation is to tell them exactly what is the situation of the troops on the ground. No matter how bad it is, tell them. You've done that, you've acquitted your duty. Now it is up to the government to look for equipment. I'm happy I heard the president saying he will get equipment. It is a federal government, this. Again, this part upsurge, I mentioned upsurge, from 2018 downwards, from 2015, following the track, it has been downward, downward, downward. Towards the ending of 2018, Boko Haram seems to be on the ascendancy. 2019, still on the ascendancy, maybe not up to the level of 2018. But what cannot be denied, still the level of insecurity in that area is not back to the 2014-2015 era. You get the point? That is what I'm saying. Now, specifically with the issue of new blood or changing, let's face the fact of this vexatious issue which I had yesterday about changing the service chief or their tenure. Now, in all honesty, this issue of service chief tenure is an issue that concerns constitutional lacuna, administrative lacuna, and also operational issues. As we are now, in all the books that we have, if you check in the Constitution, for example, there is nowhere where the tenure of the service chiefs is specified. I mentioned the first Constitution because first Constitution is the most important document when you're talking about legal this. It only talks about the president appointing service chiefs with consensus from the National Assembly. That's what it says. It didn't say tenure. The next document we might likely look at is the Armed Forces Act. And mind you, I have to say, I think that's what I say a lacuna. I think the section of the Constitution which talks about service chiefship as well talk about the tenure. That is how it should be. We didn't do that. Come to the Armed Forces Act. The Armed Forces Act also talked about the appointments of service chiefs. It didn't talk about the tenure. So if we want to find whether the service chiefs have overstayed or not, unfortunately, both the Constitution and the Armed Forces Act do not give us a clear answer. What other document do we have? There's a document called Harmonized Terms and Conditions of Service. Now, in discussing harmonized terms and conditions of service, I always mention a caveat. This is an instrument that is neither an act of National Assembly, nor is it drawn from the Constitution. The Harmonized Terms and Conditions of Service is a document written by the armed forces themselves to help them how they manage themselves. So the point I am making before I go what H. Tako says about the tenures of the service chiefs is that the legal weight of harmonized terms and conditions of service can be challenged. Now, having said that, when you look at the H. Takos, when you come to section, I think 10, it talks about tenure of service. It says that an officer from, the officers we're talking about, this is, let's be specific, we're talking about the current Chief of Defense Staff, Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Naval Staff, Chief of Air Staff. All these people, they fall under the category, under H. Takos that are said they are senior to regular course 36.
I have to interrupt you
Yes.
at this moment because we have to take a break.
Okay.
I'll let you finish your thoughts
All right, okay.
on this matter, and we'll also talk about withdrawal of troops from certain security positions and your thoughts on that as well. In just a moment, please stay with us. Retired Group Captain Sadiq Shehu is our guest. He's a security consultant, and we're talking about the tenure of the service chiefs just before we went on break. And you're making reference to the
harmonized terms and conditions of service.
Okay.
Which I said, despite its lack of legal weight, what it says about an officer retiring is in two aspects. First, what is the age of that officer? and for how long has he served in the military. For the people we are talking about, that is the CDS himself, the Chief of Army Staff, Chief of Naval Staff, and the Chief of Air Staff currently, the service chiefs, they are holding Lieutenant General rank. As of now, that is 3 service chiefs. What H.T.A. Code Section 310 said that on reaching the age of 58, they should retire. Now, I checked the CVs of all these 3 service chiefs. I see that General Buratai is going to 60 years. Chief of Naval Staff is 59 going to 60. Chief of Air Staff is 59 going to 60. So if we go strictly by that Section 3110, they should retire. However, the confusion is that the H.T.A. Code is contradictory. It has given this age. Then at the same time, you find where it says that there could be extension granted for a period of 1 year. And then there's another Section 310F, which says extension can be granted almost indefinitely. Now, again, when you go to Section 11 of the same harmonized armed service, it says service chiefs will serve for a tenure of 2 years, which is renewable once. Then again, it contradicts itself in Section 11.09 because it says the president has the powers to extend indefinitely. So the point I am making, if we are going by the extant regulations, it is very difficult for somebody to say that the president, by retaining the service chiefs, has broken any law, because the law does not exist, which says he must. And this is typically because of the lacuna we always find in our Constitution, we find in the Armed Forces Act, and even the contradictory provisions of the harmonized arms and terms and conditions of service. So going forward, in all honesty, I would say there is everybody benefits when there is clarity in any issue. As of now, we don't have clarity in the tenure of service chiefs.
Are we in a crisis such as to, necessitate that clarity? Do you acknowledge that as a result of the extended tenure of the service chiefs, this has created some problems within the rank and file, or should we say, the officers and men of the armed forces?
Okay. With my experience of 27 years military service, I can tell you there are both advantages and disadvantages for retaining service chiefs for a long time, extended tenure. But let's even define extended tenure. Do we say that these people have overstayed? The only guide that will tell us whether they have overstayed is to look at tradition. When you look at all the service chiefs that have come from military regime up to now that we're back to a civilian regime, you find on average, service chiefs serve for a tenure of 2 years, on average. In between this average, you find people who stayed very short. You find a service chief that even served for 2 months. Then you find another service chief that has stayed on for 6 years. But in general, what my research finds out is that civilian regimes have a tendency of quick turnover of service chiefs as opposed to military regimes. So when you look at that, so far, I said 6 years. 6 years, I find only Air Marshal Webb, who was service chief during Air Marshal Alpha, during Babangida's time. This is the service chief that stayed for 6 years. This is the highest time you can find. Then at the lower end of the scale, you find General Ali Gusau, who served as Chief of Army Staff for only 2 months. So the point I am making is that when you look at that, where do we situate the current chiefs? Both of them are going into their 4.5 years. The 3 of them, they are going into their 4.5 years. So how do they measure what is happening? So when we look at 4.5 years, I tell you on the average we have 2 to 3 years, generally. Then we have people that have 6 years. So in all honesty, what my research finds, even to my own surprise, is that there is tendency to exaggerate that they have overstayed. There's tendency to exaggerate that.
When I say extended tenure, if we're to go with your harmonized, with the book which you were referring to, now it says that it should serve for 2 years, which is renewable for 1 more term, which is 4 years. So they've served 4.5 years. It means that even by the rule book, it has now been extended. So that is an extended service. Isn't that right?
Very good, very good. But you have gone ahead of me. This is, again, the problem of the H.T.A. course. It says it can be extended for a second 2 years. And then the next subsection of that distance says
the president
can extend almost indefinitely.
Indeed.
Which is not good. Which is not good.
So,
which is not
because
good.
that's why I asked you the pointed question, because you're saying now that we should have clarity.
Yes.
You know, if indeed we are seeing problems that has come up as a result of their extended tenure, are we seeing any challenges? Is it affecting the morale of those? Because that's the argument, that those who ought to be promoted are not getting the promotion that they ought to get because of the extended tenure of the service chiefs. Is that right? And we're retiring like a whole bunch of people who ought to have been promoted. Is that true?
Now, I want to take a global view at what is the negative effect.
No. Before you take a global view, I want us to talk about what is happening locally. If that is the current situation right now.
Yes.
Is that a situation?
The situation that there is a crisis in the armed forces.
That there is disaffection, not a crisis, but disaffection as a result of this extended tenure. Is that what is happening?
A famous general said, inside the bag of any officer, there is the button of a general. What I mean is the military profession, anybody who enters the military profession came with the intention of rising to the top. There is no doubt regular retirements and changing of this, it gives the man at the top, at the bottom, that he too will have the opportunity of climbing to the top. However, you have to strike a balance. This is why I talked about operational issues. You have to strike at a balance between just giving people chance and the realities on the ground.
So indeed,
Yes.
let's talk about the realities on the
Yes,
ground now.
yeah.
If you also acknowledge, looking at an analysis of the crisis that we have faced, that indeed
Yes.
from 2015 to about perhaps late 2017, we made tremendous progress that was
Yes, I agree.
measurable.
Yes.
And in 2018, we experienced a decline of some sort. Would you agree with those who say perhaps we have run out of ideas? Perhaps the service chiefs have run out of ideas and new blood should be infused into the leadership?
Yes, people can make that claim or could express that opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. There are many opinions about that. However, there's the role of the C&C, who has the bigger picture to see. Is it the grumbling about they are going that should move him, or if he thinks these people are still there? Mind you, I set the premise that as of now, we don't have any law which says the president has broken that law. So there's a difference between what you should do and what you must do. There is no must.
Let us be
Yes.
mindful of
Yes.
the fact that, you know, yes, indeed, we are a nation of laws and we should be guided by laws.
Yes.
But people also agree that not everything is spelled, and then that sometimes traditions sometimes also, you know, serve as good guides. If this is how we have been doing it, as long as, you know, we have been observing it, and, you know, it's not all the time that perhaps tradition is the best way. I mean, and people are beginning to question. But the good thing about tradition, it is dynamic. It evolves.
It changes, yes.
It should change in
Yes.
response to the situation on the ground. So some people will say, in the tradition of the military, in the tradition of, you know, the appointment of service chiefs, it seems that we're experiencing an anomaly. The question is it changing for good? That's the question.
Now, I'm happy you brought global best practices. Also, in looking at, you have to look at what do other officers, other countries do in respect to tenure of service chiefs. Now, when you talk of global best practices, you can never run away from going back to the American system, probably because of the 300 plus years they have been practicing democracy. What do they do with regards to service chiefs? The tenure is specifically stated. They will serve for 2 years, which can be renewed by the president only once. This is not stated in our books. Only once. Stated only once. Then, being very practical, they made one exception which will interest you. What is that exception? They said this can only be waived when America is at war or facing national emergency. So objectively looking at it, the question to ask, is the Nigeria at war? Do we have a national emergency? If the answer is yes, you may support extension based on the fact that you want a continuity of command. However, please understand me, military history has shown again, it is not a standard rule that you can never change during war. Even in our own civil war here in Nigeria, commanders were changed during civil war. When the commander-in-chief that time, Gawan, felt some commanders were not up to the task. So I'm giving you the two options. On the other hand, this is the global best practice. So the only thing I find wrong with what we're doing in Nigeria, like I said, is this lack of clarity. Secondly, lack of communication from the government. We're all speculating now. Till date, the president and commander-in-chief has not told anybody why he is keeping those people?
Does he owe us an explanation?
I think to get the confidence of the people and even to douse the restiveness of officers who want their service chiefs to go, if there are such officers, I think it is good for the president to communicate, and it is within his right. The only semi-official reason we give, I say semi-official, because just last week, Senator Ali Ndume was on the media saying that he knows why President Buhari refused to change the service chiefs. It is because Nigeria is at war. In all honesty, for me as a military expert, it will make sense to me if the president comes out and says, this is the reason why I don't want to change, because it accords with what obtains global best practices. But lack of this communication is what is bringing a lot of speculations about these service chiefs, not only within the military, even outside. That's why we're discussing it. You were discussing it yesterday. So honestly, this is what I find the government is not doing. For the legislature, this is the time for them to take a stand. And let's be honest, the legislature in Nigeria, they have this tendency to think that anything that concerns military is not their purview. The Constitution gave them the right to formulate all laws on all subject matters. The only thing regarding to military that the National Assembly cannot do is to deploy the military. They don't have the power. They don't even have the power to appoint the service chiefs. But who qualifies to be a service chief? How long he should be a service chief? How long officers should remain before they retire? It is all within the purview of the National Assembly to set rules. Why is this necessary? It is good for the system. You talk of professionalism. When you have everything, because now we don't have clarity. If there is clarity, the officers in the service, we know that, yes, this is the tenure, so there won't be any restiveness. Even for the service chiefs, if I know I'm going to be service chief and I have only 2 years, and it is clearly stated, I will make my plans within those 2 years to see what I achieve as a service chief. But right now, it is neither here nor there. Not in the Constitution, not in the Armed Forces Act, only in the HTACOS, which again I emphasize is neither a legal document nor a constitutional output. So which can be challenged. So both the president and commander-in-chief has something to do. The legislature has something to do. And then most importantly, when you look at the provisions, if you keep these people, we have the public service rule, which says you should serve 35 years or to an age of 60. So if you keep somebody beyond that, what are the implications? Unless if you make a subsidiary legislation which says for service chiefs, they are not part of the public service rule. So the point I am making, there are a lot of lacuna. There are a lot of issues that are left hanging. But in the absence of that hanging, this is what gives the president the right to keep these people indefinitely. And not only General Buhari, not only President Buhari, any other president coming back. Since there is no law, he has the option of keeping a service chief even 10 years. And you cannot come and say that a law has been broken because the law is not there.
Okay, just quickly, I would like you to also comment on this matter of the withdrawal, the gradual withdrawal of military troops from areas that have been deemed to, be stabilized. And some people are saying that the police, they're not very sure that the police still has the capacity to be able to take over some of those areas. What are your thoughts on that matter?
My thoughts on this, again, following global best practices, at the same time, we hear a lot of complaints, even from the National Assembly, why are military being involved in internal... You have to look at this at two aspects. Areas with internal security and areas of war. Please, it's not one picture. For the areas of internal security, global best practices, and we have seen it, is that military should not be involved in internal security. It should be a police affair, maybe with other paramilitary agencies. However, what do we find ourselves? We find it being said that the army or the military is deployed in 35 or 34 out of 36 states. It's not a good thing. So if you are moving towards returning police supremacy in internal security operation, that's how it should be. But in the first place, what made the military to be there is the lack of capacity of the police over the years. I'm not blaming the police, because just like I said, you cannot blame the service chiefs for lack of equipment. It's a federal government. It's also the federal government that is responsible for depleting the police to such a level that not only they cannot perform their duty, even Nigerians, most Nigerians, even if there are two people fighting, some, if they see police, they're not even going anywhere. That is the nature of the citizens we have now. They only respect military. So we have become militarized. Any small thing, we want the military to be there. So easier said than done, return supremacy to the police. But before you do that, you have to improve capacity. You have to improve numbers. Here, I'm talking of areas of internal security. In the Northeast, where there's still an ongoing conflict, I was part of a team that did a security assessment for one agency November last year. In all honesty, what I find on the ground is that even the police themselves, honestly speaking, they believe they don't have the capacity to take over in areas that we call liberated areas. That is part of the police. On the part of the citizens, we have people, traditional rulers, local leaders saying, look, if we withdraw army, we are going to run away from that place. So the point is, it's a good plan, but to me, I think it is not something that will happen tomorrow or day after tomorrow, because there are certain conditions that have to be met. There are certain capacities in terms of number, in terms of equipment, that the police need to rise. I've heard the civil defense saying that they are ready to go. All these are there. I like the spirit and the push, but in all honesty, some of these areas, there is still war going on. Police is not strength for war. So if at all there are going to be any changes in the Northeast, for example, it will be on selective after security risk assessment of particular areas have been done. Certainly some of the areas as they are now, the police cannot take over. That is my opinion.
So this a general assessment of our battle against insurgency, where would you say we currently are?
Okay. For me, when talking about the insurgency, I take 3 indices to indicate where we are. Areas lost to Boko Haram or being held by Boko Haram. Number of attacks is the second criteria. Third, number of deaths. Fourth, number of IDPs that are fleeing from these areas. So when I'm looking at these 4 indices, I start from 2009. I keep track of this up to through every regime. Late Adua, Jonathan, and now President Buhari. I look at where we are. And of course, all the service chiefs who led the war from that time. And again, like I said, objectively, we cannot deny that there has been an improvement. But within this level of improvement, like I told you, especially from ending 2018, we saw a resurgence of Boko Haram. But till today, the fact remains honest, we are not back to the bad position of 2014, mid-2015. So this is where we are. Can we do better? Of course, we can do much, much better. The current situation is not acceptable. We can do much, much better. But while saying we can do much, much better is not to say, to deny that there's an improvement. You can have many...
I was going to ask you what
yes.
we need to do. Is it just in terms of providing weapons for the forces, or what do we need to do?
Honestly, one thing I think, again, this is where I made mention of the service chiefs. What they owe duty to the political masters is telling them the blunt, honest truth about our equipment status. Do we have equipment? From Jonathan's time to now, has there been increase? Yes, there are some increases from major possessions, but are we sufficient? In all honesty, the answer is no. You can count on officers and soldiers' courage, but there's a limit that courage can give you success if you don't have the equipment. We are very bad. And again, I sympathize with the federal government. Whether it is said or not, Nigeria is still facing some form of unannounced sanctions from getting these weapons. So in all honesty, unfortunately, it's not just a matter of saying, take my money, give me. In some aspects, even with your money, the weapons are not going to be given to you. And unfortunately, Nigeria is not a manufacturer of weapons.
Well, DACON says that is about to change. We'll wait and see just how much of a change is going to come in the new year.
Yes, but the services should tell the political masters what they have and what they don't have.
Well, we hope that they're doing just that in all the numerous meetings that they have. Well, we have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning and saying it as you feel it. Retired Group Captain Sadiq Shehu is a security consultant. Well, that's it for this segment of Sunrise Daily. We'll come back and take some of your comments and feedback. Please stay with us.
All right, let's take a look at some comments coming through from you. Well, Joseph sends this one. Joseph, you know why I skipped the second name, don't you? Well, Joseph talking about JAM on the NIN registration sites. I totally agree that the NIN is another Herculean hurdle for JAMB candidates. It's a logistic nightmare for people to get the NIN, especially in highly populated areas with limited centers.
It's part of what you said earlier about those state areas out of urban centers. This one is from YouTube, and it's Felix Odili saying, this is a serious challenge for our children. The authorities should review the policy and stop playing politics with the future of our children.
Osho says the children of the people making these laws don't school here. He believes that they can't feel their pain well enough. Whew.
It's something that the authorities need to actually look into.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that they get it spot on, because if we elected public officials, we didn't put them in there to make our lives harder. It's to make it easier. So we hope a word is enough. Maybe the wise politician. I don't know.
Well, most certainly wise, everyone.
All right, so there you go. That is the show this week. I don't know. I thought 2 days ago was a Monday, maybe because of the New Year, but we'll get by. We'll get by. 2020 coming with its attendant blessings, I might add. Well, thank you all for watching. We will see you next week. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Welcome to a new year.
And I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf. Do have a great weekend.